Most people believe respect comes from explaining themselves well, from defending their intentions, clarifying misunderstandings, and making sure everyone knows they meant no harm. So when someone questions them, they rush to explain. When someone doubts them, they rush to justify. When someone criticizes them, they rush to defend themselves. At first, this seems reasonable. It even seems mature. But in the hidden dynamics of human psychology, something very different is happening beneath the surface. The more you explain yourself, the less powerful you appear, because explanation signals something subtle to the human mind. It signals that you need approval. And once people sense that you need approval, the balance of power shifts without anyone saying a word. Think about the most respected people you know, the ones whose presence changes the atmosphere of a room. Do they constantly explain themselves? Do they desperately correct every misunderstanding? Do they rush to defend every criticism? Usually not. They speak when necessary, but they rarely feel the need to justify their existence. And this creates a psychological effect that Carl Jung often hinted at when discussing the nature of the self and the persona. Jung believed that most people live behind a mask designed to gain acceptance. This mask constantly seeks validation from others. It wants to be liked, understood, approved of. And because of this, it becomes reactive. The moment someone challenges that mask, the mind rushes to protect it. That is when the explanations begin, the justifications, the long emotional defenses. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The more you defend your persona, the more fragile it appears. In social psychology, status is not determined by who speaks the most. It is determined by who appears least dependent on approval. This is why people who constantly explain themselves often lose respect without understanding why. They believe they are being transparent, honest, responsible. But what others unconsciously perceive is insecurity. When you explain every action, every decision, every boundary, you send a silent message. You are saying, without realizing it, please understand me. Please approve of me. Please don't reject me. And human beings are extremely sensitive to this signal, not consciously, but instinctively. In every social group, there is an invisible hierarchy. Some people are seen as stable centers of gravity. Others are seen as people who orbit around the approval of others. The difference between these two positions is often determined by a single behavior. Reaction. People who constantly explain themselves react to every emotional stimulus around them. Criticism, disapproval, confusion. They feel compelled to resolve it immediately. But people who command respect operate differently. They tolerate misunderstanding. They allow silence. They understand something most people never learn. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every accusation deserves defense. Not every opinion requires response. Because when you explain yourself too much, you are not just communicating information. You are negotiating your value. Imagine two individuals in the same situation. Both are criticized unfairly. The first immediately launches into a long explanation. They clarify their intentions, justify their actions, and attempt to repair the perception others may have of them. The second listens quietly. Maybe they respond briefly. Maybe they say nothing at all. Days pass. The criticism fades, and something strange happens. People begin to reassess the situation on their own. Why? Because silence creates psychological tension. When someone refuses to enter the arena of emotional defense, observers are forced to interpret the situation themselves. And very often, silence communicates confidence more effectively than any explanation ever could. This phenomenon is deeply connected to something Jung described as psychological projection. When people do not receive the reaction they expect, their own assumptions begin to surface. Some begin to question whether they misjudged you. Others feel uncomfortable because they cannot read your internal state, and uncertainty changes the social dynamic. Human beings instinctively respect what they cannot easily control or predict. But when you constantly explain yourself, you remove that uncertainty. You become fully readable, fully predictable, fully accessible, and predictability in social hierarchies rarely generates respect. It generates familiarity. And familiarity, when excessive, often erodes status. This does not mean silence should become arrogance, nor does it mean you should never communicate clearly. The key difference lies in motivation. Are you speaking to communicate truth, or are you speaking to protect your image? Are you explaining because the situation truly requires clarity, or because the thought of being misunderstood makes you uncomfortable? These are two very different psychological states. One comes from internal stability, the other comes from dependence on external validation. People who constantly explain themselves are often trying to control how others perceive them. But perception is something no one can fully control, and the attempt to control it often produces the opposite result. The more you try to shape everyone's opinion of you, the more it becomes clear that their opinion has power over you. And power, once given away, is difficult to reclaim. This is why individuals who command quiet respect operate with a different principle. They allow people to misunderstand them. They allow people to question them. They allow space to exist between their actions and others' interpretations. Not because they enjoy conflict, but because they understand something deeper. Respect is not built through constant explanation. Respect emerges from internal certainty. When you know who you are, you do not feel compelled to narrate your intentions to the world. Your actions speak. Your boundaries speak. Your consistency speaks. Over time, people begin to understand you not through your explanations, but through your behavior. And behavior, unlike words, cannot be easily manipulated. The paradox is that when you stop explaining yourself all the time, something interesting happens. People begin to observe you more carefully. Your words carry more weight because they are not constantly used. Your presence becomes more defined because it is not diluted by endless emotional negotiation. And slowly, without forcing it, respect begins to grow. Not the fragile respect that comes from pleasing everyone, but the durable respect that comes from psychological stability. Of course, this shift is uncomfortable at first. When you stop over-explaining, some people may become irritated. Others may accuse you of being distant or cold. But these reactions often reveal something important. Many people grow accustomed to having access to your emotional explanations. They rely on your reactions to maintain their own sense of control. When that pattern disappears, the dynamic changes. And change in social dynamics often creates resistance. But over time, something else appears. Clarity. The people who truly respect you will remain. Those who depended on your constant emotional availability may drift away. And in that quiet filtering process, something valuable is revealed. Who respected you as a person and who simply enjoyed having influence over your reactions. Carl Jung once suggested that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires separating yourself from the expectations of the collective. And one of the first steps in that separation is learning to tolerate being misunderstood. Because the moment you no longer feel compelled to explain yourself to everyone, you reclaim something powerful. Psychological sovereignty, the ability to exist without constant external validation. And once that happens, something subtle shifts in the social world around you. You speak less, but your words carry more meaning. You explain less, but your intentions become clearer through your actions. And people begin to recognize a quiet form of strength that cannot be easily manipulated. Because the person who does not constantly justify their existence sends a powerful message without ever saying it. They are not negotiating their value. They already know it. Stay sharp.